My name is Kimberly Cizek Allen. I'm the Development and Marketing Director at Kitsap Immigrant Assistance Center. We call ourselves, and we're known in the community as KIAC, so KIAC for Kitsap Immigrant Assistance Center. So you'll hear me refer to KIAC very often throughout this presentation. It took me a minute to realize that no one was talking about like the, boat situation. So KIAC is where I work. And to give you kind of an outline of what I plan to cover today when talking about KIAC and some of the questions that were submitted, I do plan to give a little bit of a history of KIAC, talk about our three primary programs, talk a little bit about who we serve and some of our partnerships in the community, and then launch into the question and answers, both with the pre-populated questions that were submitted, and then also I'll open things up for questions that everyone might have. So Kitsap Immigrant Assistance Center works for the well-being and empowerment of immigrants, and we do that through education, advocacy, and social justice. As our vision says, we envision a community where everyone, regardless of where they were born, has fair and equitable access to justice, respect, and opportunity. And we live out our mission and our vision through three primary programs. We have our Family Services Program, our Immigration Legal Services Program, and our Tax and Business Services Program. And before I kind of dive into what each of these programs do, I do want to give a little bit of a history of KIAC. So KIAC started in 2004. It was founded by two women, Martitha May and April Bourbon, who saw the need for family resources specifically for immigrants that were newly arrived or had been in our area for some time. In 2006, KIAC became an official 501c3 nonprofit. At this time, it was known as the Immigrant Assistance Center. We hadn't tacked on the Kitsap portion of our name. So mostly family services work was happening between 2006 and 2013. And then in 2013, a few other individuals came on board. The name was officially changed to Kitsap Immigrant Assistance Center, and a board of directors was formed. So this little ragtag nonprofit kind of got a little bit more bones and structure behind the work that we do. In 2014, we started the immigration legal arm of KIAC, and the immigration legal services that we provide at KIAC are actually provided in a pretty unique way. So the Department of Justice has certified immigration legal work at KIAC and has allowed us to create and recruit and train accredited representatives. In immigration legal work, immigrants, unlike other types of legal proceedings, they aren't guaranteed representation and they aren't given representation. So they often have to seek representation from within the community. And that's what we do at KIAC. And we do that with volunteer accredited representatives. So these individuals have volunteered, gone through 2 years of training, and are now able to work with clients on a variety of immigration legal matters, which is pretty amazing. So that program started in 2014. In 2017, Executive Director Sally Tellickson was hired part-time to take over from Martitha May, who stayed involved with KIAC, but became more in charge of our family services type work. And then in 2018, we had our programs separated here in West Bremerton in two different locations, and we moved them all under one roof in East Bremerton, which is the current location that we're at right now, which is, I think it's 3627 Wheaton Way, in a building that I would never think of, but upstairs we have a Nerf gun. I don't know if you guys have seen that place, but it's like a Nerf gun building where right around 3 to 5 p.m. in our office, we hear all of these kids like playing Nerf wars upstairs. So we're in the lower section of that building. And then really when Sally came on board in 2017 and into 2018 and even into today, KIAC has kind of begun this transition and is undergoing this transition of being volunteer-led to being staff-led and volunteer-supported. So there's been a lot of maturing of the organization as we bring on staff members. We currently have 10 staff members, so we're still a pretty lean team. We total about 8.5 FTE. And then we're getting all of the organizational things in place to be able to have those staff members. So policies and procedure sets. And so it feels like KIAC is growing up, and the foundation that we've been built on is really stable and really strong. So to talk a little bit about what we do and how we do it, I'll start with our family services program. Our family services team is 2 staff members. It's our director of family services, Annika, who you'll hear me mention by name, and then also our family services coordinator, Tracy. And those two individuals work with a host of volunteers to do a little bit of everything for a large number of people. So I could run through this list, but I think giving you like an anecdote or a story might be a bit more powerful. At least I find it more powerful. So I've created a KIAC client that doesn't exist, but could very well exist. This individual is newly arrived to the United States. He happens to be living with some family, and he was out and about doing some things and fell down and broke his arm. So this client knows he needs medical attention. So he goes to the hospital. He's seen in the emergency room. They treat his broken arm. He's discharged home with a cast. A little bit later, he gets a medical bill in the mail at his shared unit. And this medical bill is expensive. It's in English. He doesn't totally understand it. He just knows that it's a lot of money. And I think, as all of us know, healthcare in this country is expensive. It's expensive with insurance, and it's expensive, incredibly expensive without insurance. So this newly arrived, soon to be KIAC client doesn't know what to do with this bill that's showed up, but he knows that he needs to pay it. He doesn't know what options are available. So he shows it to his brother, who he lives with. And his brother said, "Oh yeah, my friend had a medical bill like this show up. They went to KIAC and KIAC was kind of able to help. I think you should do that." So this newly arrived immigrant that I've created doesn't drive yet. He doesn't have a license in the state of Washington, but his cousin does, who also lives with him. So when his cousin gets home, they get in the car and they go to KIAC. And they walk into KIAC and they're met by Jorge. And Jorge is in this first picture up here on the left. Jorge is our bilingual administrative assistant who answers the phone, answers the door, kind of directs traffic that comes into KIAC. And Jorge is able to have a conversation with this new KIAC client and talk about what some of the concerns are, and realizes that he needs help with our family services department. So he goes and he checks with Annika, who's in this bottom corner here. And Annika is our bilingual in Spanish and English director of family services. She happens to be free in 20 minutes. So our new client hangs out. He's screened for COVID symptoms and given a mask, and he hangs out in our lobby. And then he meets with Annika. And in their conversation, Annika sort of assesses how new he is to this area, what resources he has available, what his language skills are, and things of that nature, and realizes that he's probably going to need some financial assistance. So she calls her contacts over at the hospital, lets them know about the bill, puts them on speakerphone, does interpretation between the client and the hospital, and they work out, a payment plan for this particular client. Plus, he's able to apply for financial assistance because he came into KIAC in time. Unfortunately, people sometimes don't know that you have a certain window of time in which to apply for financial assistance. If a bill arrives and it's in a language you don't understand and you're new to the area, you wouldn't maybe inherently know that you have about 30 days to act on that. So yeah, medical bill. Yes, okay. Correct. Okay. And so in this situation with this particular medical bill, he happened to get to KIAC in time. Annika was able to help work out financial assistance through the hospital, and he set up on a payment plan. So then in conversation, Annika realizes he's probably going to need some follow-up care. So he's planning to get his cast off. He already has an appointment for that. But he's going to need something after that, right? So she says, we have a medical clinic at KIAC that we do in partnership with West Sound Free Clinic. They come on site to KIAC 3 times a month, and they provide medical care, including physical therapy and other types of medical upkeep for our adult clients. And so she schedules him for an appointment with our physical therapist to do some physical therapy on his broken wrist that I've made up, and also has him come in to kind of get established with the nurse practitioner and make sure that everything else is going okay. So that would be one example of like what it might look like for our family services team to work with a client. We do all sorts of things: translate forms and medical bills, housing assistance, whether that be connecting someone with housing assistance in the area, helping them find a rental, helping them fill out paperwork for a rental, or if they don't qualify for housing assistance within the community, we do offer an emergency assistance fund, where in some cases we can help people if they need help with 1 or 2 months of rent if they're in a really sticky spot. Pantry staples and clothing. We have a clothing closet in partnership with New Beginnings Closet, which is located over by Bremerton High School. And 3 times a month, our clients can come and be met with someone who speaks their language, they've scheduled an appointment, they can come in and get seasonally appropriate clothing for their family. And then we do give them a bag of dry goods that has culturally appropriate food and items in there, like black beans and maseka flour and white rice. And then we do have a partnership with Eastside Baby Corner, which is a really cool organization in our area that gives child and infant supplies out to those who need it. And a lot of our clients might not know about Eastside Baby Corner or be able to access the services because of language barriers. So they come to KIAC. We have a relationship with Eastside Baby Corner, and we can connect them with diapers, bottles, all of the things that you might need for a new child or infant in your life. And then we do have the medical clinics that I've talked about, and we have 2 dental clinics. Those are in partnership with Peninsula Community Health Services. And those happen at KIAC twice a month, and they provide language, low cost or free dental care, language accessible, low cost or free dental care to our clients. And I don't know if you guys have seen the PCHS dental van, but it's called the Molar Roller, which just gets me every time. So it just rumbles into the parking lot, sets up shop, and then our clients are able to get that dental care. And then we do glasses referrals and other things of that nature. So that's kind of our,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Quickly, so when you said your client, broken arm is going to need follow-up care, and you have
Yes.
the 3 times a month medical clinic at KIAC in partnership with
West Sound Free Clinic. And that's a group that does a lot of free clinics in the area. And they set up in different places. But again, having them on site at KIAC just lets our clients know that 1, there will be interpretation, 2, it's a safe space and things of that nature. And so if we switch gears and we talk a little bit about KIAC's immigration legal services, I think to start, which anyone who's read the Borders Within book that the book club just recently read, I think they make a really good point of saying that there just really isn't a legal pathway for most immigrants in our area. And the legal pathways that might be available to people are really convoluted and complicated. And it takes forever. I mean, someone can come into the country and they don't know about their status for years and years. So it's a very long process and it's very complicated. And also immigrants tend to have more favorable rulings with representation simply because they would have someone available there to be someone who understands what the judge is saying. I mean, if I wade very far into legal matters, not being a lawyer myself, I get instantly confused. And so having like an added language barrier on top of that just makes it even more challenging. So with that representation, there tends to be, all the right boxes are checked, all of the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and there are more favorable outcomes for people who have come to this country. So if someone were to go pay for immigration legal representation, it's expensive. And some people can do it and some people do go that pathway. But for a lot of people who are living at or below the federal poverty line or well below the federal poverty line, that's pretty cost prohibitive. So that's where KIAC comes in. So we provide low cost, in a lot of cases it's pro bono, immigration legal services for over 600 immigrants annually. And that's done with 3 staff members. And it's also done with I think our most recent number is 12 accredited representatives. So again, that's those volunteers that have gone through this 2 years of rigorous training to then volunteer their time to manage immigration legal matters. And then we do have a small handful of lawyers or attorneys who donate their time as well. So the lead of our program up here is Larry. He's in the upper corner there. And Larry has over 20 years of immigration legal experience. So he has graciously given his time as the director of legal services and his experience to KIAC. And then we do have 2 other staff members in that department. Right under Larry is Alex. He's our paralegal. And then I didn't put Carmen up here, but Carmen is our legal coordinator. I think what's interesting about Alex actually is that Alex is trilingual. So he's fluent in English, Spanish, and a language called Conjubal, which is one of the Mayan dialects. A lot of KIACs clients are from Guatemala, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but Spanish would be their second language if they speak Spanish, and their language of origin would be Mom or Conjubal. So Alex came to KIAC from, he was kind of referred to us and got involved with us from a previous client who's really active in the community where he lives in North Mason County. He knew Alex, recommended that Alex come kind of check us out and get started with us. And so Alex joined our team a few months ago. So he has pretty rich connections within the community of immigrants that we serve. And he's also very handy to have around simply because he's trilingual, which is brilliant. So, and then when I look at, you know, the things that we offer for clients, there's all sorts of different immigration legal matters that, as I've mentioned before, are pretty complex and nuanced as to like who can apply for which types of things. But we do have naturalizations where folks can become citizens and we can help them with that. We have DACA filings and renewals, work authorizations, asylum cases, green card renewals and replacements, and then a whole bunch of other things that we do for our immigration legal clients. And just to give you like one little story, you can see Ray up here with one of KIAC's clients. And this particular client, he and his wife came from their country of origin and crossed. So in their country of origin, they were being persecuted by one arm of the government. So in a lot of the countries of origin for our clients, there's a lot of political unrest. And if you find yourself on the other side of whichever government happens to be in power, you're significantly persecuted. Often there's death threats. So they felt like their lives were at risk, and they came across the border and immediately turned themselves into Customs and Border Protection agents. And the wife had some pre-existing medical conditions and was released to family in Florida. And for whatever reason, our client was just shipped up here to Washington, about as far from Florida as you can get, and was incarcerated at the Northwest ICE Processing Center in Tacoma. So his family reached out to KIAC, and we don't often take like removal cases because they can be really complex. Only a few members of our team can do that type of work. They last forever. They take up a bunch of time. But in this situation, we weren't necessarily going to be doing his like asylum proceedings to stop his removal. All we wanted to do was try and get him out on bail so that he could be released to his family and then go through these types of proceedings closer to where he lives. So Ray was able to work with this client and the family, and then also work with the folks at the Northwest ICE Processing Center to come up with a bail that was not cost prohibitive, which oftentimes the bails that they will suggest are outrageous, like $20,000 or something for someone who hasn't committed a crime, for someone who came across the border and said, hey, my life's at risk, I want to have asylum here. And they're incarcerated, and then there's this huge bail. So they settled on a bail that was affordable to the family. He was released. Ray actually went and met him. While he was incarcerated, he was really into knitting. And so he knitted a bunch of hats for the staff members. So we all had little hats that we could wear after. And then Ray helped him get to the airport, and he was reunited with his wife and his family later that day. So that's like one small example, or one actually big example of one small element of the immigration legal work that we do at KIAC. And then the third program is our tax and business services program. And this is kind of like, it's run under Larry's department, but it's completely volunteer run. So we have 3 volunteers who work with Jorge to schedule appointments. But we have a contact who will help our clients get ITINs, or individual taxpayer identification numbers. So most undocumented immigrants can't work for someone else because they don't have a social security number. They can't prove their legal status. But in the state of Washington, whether you're documented or undocumented, you can apply for an ITIN, and that will allow you to start your own business to pay taxes. So you could legally-ish, I guess, have a business. And the tax folks, from my understanding, they're not like a pipeline for ICE. So they basically want to know that people who are doing business in this state are paying the required taxes to be doing business. They're not like also waving to ICE to say, hey, this person's undocumented, come pick them up at their job that they're working at. So what we do is we will refer people to help get them ITINs if they need or want one, and then we will help them with state and federal tax filings. I know when I try and do my own taxes and English is my primary language, I find it confusing. So what our folks really help do is kind of be that bridge between just help them with state and federal tax filings, and then also help train them how to do state and federal tax filings. Yes.
So with an ITIN, you still can't work for somebody else.
Correct. But you can do your own work and pay your own taxes. So I kind of outlined like the 3 programs that we have, but I do have a video that I want to show you that just kind of shows like how all of that work is tied together and how KIAC is really a hub of both direct services and also resources for immigrants in our area. So that's what I'm going to show next. And if everyone could just cross their fingers that the tech that we've practiced works, that would be great.
What do you think of when you hear the word hub? If you're a techie, maybe you think of the connection point where data streams converge and are sent out to respective devices. If you're into cars and bicycles, perhaps you think of a central part of a wheel from which the spokes radiate. And if you're tuned into enterprise, you might consider a hub the effective center of a region or a network. No matter which version of hub comes to mind first, they share common attributes. Hubs are connectors, they're central, and they're stable. Kitsap Immigrant Assistance Center is the trusted hub for immigrants in the West Salish Puget Sound region. We are connectors, we are central, and we are trusted and stable. At KIAC, we build relationships with and between our clients and existing providers. We advocate for the accessibility of community services, and we fill in when we see service gaps. To get a better understanding of KIAC's hub-like nature, let's look at a story, Maria's story. Maria and her husband came to the United States from El Salvador. 7 years ago, they applied for citizenship through KIAC's immigration legal program. While her husband passed the citizenship interviews, Maria struggled to learn English and did not. KIAC reapplied for Maria's citizenship once eligible. During the waiting period, Maria's husband unexpectedly passed away. Along with the grief of losing her partner, Maria lost his part of their Social Security income and was in an extremely difficult financial situation. KIAC's Family Services team stepped in, helping to meet some of Maria's most urgent needs. They connected Maria with a supplier of firewood, her only heat source during the cold winter months. Maria was introduced to a tutor to help her study for the civics test, and KIAC team members helped Maria practice for her interview. Despite the stress and sadness of losing her husband, and in the face of financial uncertainty, Maria passed the full 100-question civics test and her citizenship interview, becoming a citizen of the United States in December 2021. Maria's story highlights the work KIAC does for immigrants every day. Whether it's completing an application for housing assistance, working with someone to apply for a green card, connecting an immigrant with accessible dental care, and all of the many things in between, KIAC is the trusted hub for immigrants in our region. When you partner with KIAC, you make this work possible. You become part of our hub. Thank you for considering a gift to KIAC today.
Yes.
I lost the thread there at the very beginning. Was Maria herself undocumented?
So when they both came in, technically they would have probably been undocumented to some extent, although they might have come in. I don't know what their origin was, if they came in with like a visa that hadn't yet expired, in which case they would have been documented and then started the citizenship, proceeding. So I don't know if at any point they were undocumented. I'm not sure what their origin was to get here. Because if you think about how people get here, a lot of people come in, as they said in the book and in other areas, but a lot of people will come in with a visa, a travel visa, a school visa, some sort of legal way of being in the country, and then they'll just overstay their visa. And as soon as they overstay their visa, they do become technically undocumented. And then you have what I think a lot of us sometimes will think of, which is someone coming across the border through channels, and they're undocumented from the very beginning. So I don't know if at any point actually Maria was undocumented.
And didn't the book say that it was about 60% of the undocumented people in the country
Yes,
are overstayers?
correct. Yes,
And the husband became a citizen?
he did. Yes, he was able to pass the questions and learn English and became a citizen. And then at some point, it sounds like he must have gotten some Social Security income. And so then he was getting that income for some period of time, and then unfortunately he passed away. So I think that gives you like a picture of kind of how KIAC does what we do, but it also leads into talking about who we serve and who as an organization we're accountable to, because we're accountable to the people that we serve. So according to the 2020 census, which I will talk a little bit later about how immigrants, especially undocumented immigrants, are probably underrepresented in most all census counts. But per the 2020 census, 9% of the Kitsap population is foreign born, which means about 18,000 immigrants are making their lives here in Kitsap County. And out of those 18,000, we serve over 2,000 immigrants annually. So we're only serving a small portion of the total number of immigrants that are in our region. And that number has jumped significantly since 2019. I think both in part because we have more team members now that are able to actually meet the demand that's already and always out there. And also I think we tend to get most of our clients via word of mouth. And as we've been pretty established here in this community for some time, we have a really stable, secure reputation. And so people are being referred to us by those they know. The majority of our clients are from Guatemala, and they're indigenous Mayans, but we have worked with immigrants from over 70 countries. Go ahead.
So what is happening in Guatemala, just briefly, that is happening? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I definitely, and I will say this about every question that I answer, I am not an immigration expert by any means, but I do know there's a lot of civil unrest in Guatemala right now, and I know there's a lot of persecution of indigenous folks. So anytime a country experiences colonization where another country has come in and wants to set up shop and how things run, it seems like the indigenous folks are often the ones that have the hardest time kind of going along with that. And in a lot of cases, it's just very disempowering for those individuals. And also they're facing outright persecution and unrest. So, and
I think it's been a weather factor.
correct.
Severe weather in Guatemala, the area of Guatemala, where everything was, all the crops were destroyed, all the farms were destroyed, and there was no money to rebuild them. So, yeah, it was absolutely devastating. The last, I think it was the last couple of just flattened, and it just flattened the area.
And I think if you also don't really have good infrastructure in place to support your people when stuff like that happens, you know, it just makes things really, really rough. And the reason that they kind of have come up into this area is because, as everyone probably can surmise, with immigration, you tend to go like where there's people that you might know, people that speak your language, where places of worship are already set up, where there's kind of already a community. So that's why with the refugees from Afghanistan, we didn't have really any that settled in our area. There are some like in Tacoma and Federal Way, but not in Kitsap County, just because we don't have a really large population or presence already in place. So we don't have an established place of worship that would kind of draw people in. So most of our clients tend to earn less than the federal poverty line. And out of, I think it's 80% of our clients earn less than the federal poverty line. And out of those 80%, the bulk of them earn less than 200% of the poverty line. So we're talking about folks that really aren't making very much money. So you see a lot of co-housing, a lot of people that are living with family or with friends or with others in one housing unit. Most of our clients are young families, although we do have some single individuals. And we also do have some folks that are actually unaccompanied minors who have maybe come up here to live with an aunt or an uncle or a friend or someone. So And then we primarily serve Kitsap and North Mason County. That's kind of our primary service area, but we do have some immigration legal clients in Clallam, Jefferson, and Thurston County. We have 3 accredited representatives that work out of Port Townsend. We have a little satellite office space off of a church in Port Townsend. And so those 3 do serve some clients that are from up north. And then I see it in the chat. Maybe there's a question. Let's see. Maybe someone's having some difficulty hearing. I don't know. Is it any better now, or is it still pretty quiet? Someone can pop in there. Oh, it might be. Okay. So I came on board with KIAC last August, and one of the things that impressed me the most about our organization is how robustly we've partnered with other nonprofits in the area. So if someone is already doing work, we don't want to redo that work. We just want to connect our clients with that work in a way that's safe and accessible, and then advocate for accessibility within the service lines of other organizations. So I've already talked a little bit about our partnership with West Sound Free Clinic, Eastside Baby Corner, Peninsula Community Health Services, New Beginnings Closet. So Jefferson County Immigrant Rights Advocates is who we partner with for some of our work up north in our satellite office. The Public Health District, we're just in communication about, especially regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. Kitsap Community Resources, they've actually done a lot of work over the last decade or so to make their service lines more accessible, more bilingual. So we do partner with them when it comes to like job readiness and sort of early childhood education things. But I would say we have over 35 partners that we work with, that we talk to, that we communicate with. And I think that it's just kind of brilliant how KIAC is like, you're doing this thing. We know our clients need this thing. We want our clients to be able to come receive your services. These are the things that would really help for them to feel safe to do that and for them to feel able to do that. And so I do definitely think that the partnerships that we've built and created help the community as a whole, and then also just kind of help with the foundation of KIAC. And then, so the question and answers, I'll go through the questions that I got ahead of time. And then at the end, we'll have kind of a section for additional questions that we haven't covered. I know I said this earlier, but I do want everyone to know that I'm not by any means an expert on immigration, or I don't have my own lived immigrant experience. So in answering these questions, I've spoken with other people on my team who are in very close community with the constituent base that we serve. So for how many clients are currently receiving services at KIAC, it's a little over 2,000, just over 600 of those are in our immigration legal arm of things. And then for the remainder, it's between tax and business services and family services. And we are, those were 2021 numbers, and we're on track basically to have the same, if not higher volumes for this particular year. The second question was, I think last time when Ray was here, most of our clients were having to go to like Portland or I think Yakima for their citizenship interviews and naturalization ceremonies. Is that still happening? It doesn't sound like that's still happening because the wait times in Seattle are significantly less than they were at that time. So at that time, it was like 18 to 24 months for wait times for Seattle. So to offload some of that volume in Seattle, they were sending people farther out to Portland and Yakima. Now the wait time is like 6 months or less for Seattle. So most people can stay local when going for their citizenship interview and naturalization ceremonies. Are the immigrants who come to KIAC feeling threatened or intimidated? And if so, what does that look like? So Kitsap tends to be more immigrant friendly than a lot of other areas, even other areas in Washington. So for the most part, I don't think that the immigrants in our area are feeling like threatened every day. I did talk to Annika about this, and she had a few examples of clients who don't really travel unnecessarily. Like even she said, I was talking to a client the other day and I said, hey, have you been up to Paulsbo? I recommend you go to Sly's Bakery. And I think they were talking about baked goods for some reason. So anyway, the immigrant said, I don't go to Paul, like I don't go to Paulsbo. I don't really go anywhere that I don't have to go, simply because one, it's expensive to do that, but then also it was because I think there's this thought that with travel there is risk. So if they can just kind of keep a lower profile, not raise their public profile, not be out and about as much, then that risk wouldn't be quite as high. And Annika has said that she's heard that from some people, but it doesn't feel like it's as bad as it was under the last administration, for sure. It feels like immigrants feel like they can travel a bit more now, like within the community, and they aren't feeling necessarily like threatened or intimidated on the regular. I do think one thing to talk about here, though, that I have kind of a loose grasp on right now, but there's something called public charge, which if an immigrant is applying for a specific type of like legal permission to be in the United States, they cannot have received public assistance. And I can't even articulate to all of you exactly like what the difference is between which of those types of cases. And so for a lot of immigrants, I think they do have some hesitancy to seek out public assistance and accept public assistance because they're nervous that it will impact the future of their immigration legal matter. So with asylum, Annika was saying that public charge doesn't apply. So if someone is here applying for asylum and they accept, housing assistance or food stamps for a child that they have that's a citizen here, then that wouldn't necessarily apply. But I think there's kind of this idea within the communities that we serve, like, my cousin took assistance and then it impacted his case negatively. He was sent out. I'm not taking any assistance. So I do think that there is a little bit of that kind of comes up, which is, I think, a version of the chilling effect that was talked about in the book. Okay, what are the needs at KIAC? Obviously, donations, I think, are something that we can always use. And I'll just touch basically on our funding sources, which is question 6 in this as well. So 50% of KIAC's annual revenue is through individual donations, and that's from people within our community. 50% is through grants. And some of those grants are government grants, which we've still had to apply for and we get reimbursement for, but part of those grants are just general grants. So 50% of our revenue comes in through individual donations. So donating at KIAC is powerful and it's important. And if you're not really into or able to donate money, you can donate things. So if I go through my closet and I want to donate something, clothing or what have you, I will usually give it to New Beginnings Closet in Bremerton, simply because I know that's where KIAC clients go to get their clothing. So don't bring your clothing items to KIAC, but you can bring them to New Beginnings Closet, and that's our partner. And then we do have this monthly sponsorship program that we set up for church groups or book clubs or groups like this, where you can collect supplies for a month, and they're very specific supplies of those dry goods that we give out. So that would be things like the black beans, the maseca flour, the rice. So if that's something that you're part of a group and you're like, hey, my church would like to do that, you can reach out and we can hook you up with the materials that you need. We have flyers and advertising materials. We can use volunteers. If you are bilingual in English and Spanish, please volunteer at KIAC. That would be great. If you aren't bilingual, we can use English speakers for a few things. One is our holiday bundles that we do every year. That's where we bundle up items that are both fun and functional for over 250 immigrant families. So it's a huge fun endeavor to be part of that happens in December. And then you can tutor. It's challenging if you're just English speaking to tutor someone. Typically, most of our folks that are being tutored or need tutoring, we refer out to like group tutoring. So they offer a class at Goodwill. Olympic College, I think, also offers a class. But we do have like these very specific situations where if you're a past educator and this sounds interesting to you, sometimes we have clients who can't drive, so they can't make it to the group classes. So we would have to meet them at their homes. And then every once in a while, what's actually fairly common, we'll have someone who doesn't speak Spanish, doesn't speak English, and cannot read or write. So that individual speaks one of the indigenous Maya languages, and we, if you're a trained educator and you're like, this is a thing I could do, then yes, we would love to have you for that as well.
How could you help that person?
So there are, we know that there are trained educators who can teach someone to read, who can teach someone who's never read or written to read and write in English, simply because they've never read or written in any other language. And so it's a unique skill set that's pretty complicated. So if you happen to have that skill set or the passion to learn it, we can use your assistance as well. And then I think other ways that you can help immigrant families, obviously you're a well-educated group that likes to learn. And I think learning as much as we can about the facts of immigration, learning about what it's like to have lived immigrant experience, and then just using that knowledge and information to kind of dispel some of the myths that are out there. As we near midterm elections, immigration is a pretty contentious issue. And I think there is a lot of misinformation that really gets spread. And so educating yourself to be able to meet the misinformation with facts and do it in a way that's compassionate and clear within your own circles of influence, there's immense power in that. So that would be my recommendation. And then of course, not that I have to tell you to do this, but get out and vote. That is another way that you can help immigrant families. So I touched on the funding sources. So for the census, the 2020 census, I think this touches back on one, like, I think there's probably a good amount of a lack of participation because one doesn't want your public profile to be raised. So even though the census is supposed to be somewhat anonymous, like you're not filling this out and then it's being sent to, ICE, I think that there would be some reticence and hesitancy to complete something like that if you had undocumented status. I also think that, like, some of us who know about the census and know the value of the census participate in it, but if you don't really know about it, you don't know the value of it, like, why would you complete this really long questionnaire that you have to do? So KIAC actually received a grant before the 2020 census, and we used that funding to promote participation in the census. So Annika followed the prompts as if she were someone who maybe couldn't read or write and was going to complete the census in Spanish on the phone. So she went through the process, and then she was able to type up instructions for our clients who fall into that category, and then tell them about that through phone calls that we made. We also made text messages to our clients to encourage them to participate in the census. So I think that participation was probably pretty low for immigrants in the 2020 census, especially, I was talking with Larry, our director of legal services, and he said the census became really politicized, like, during that time. And everything that kind of has become politicized, immigrants have shied away from to some extent. So even in the COVID-19 vaccine, we've seen so much politicization and misinformation about the COVID-19 vaccine that there's been lower, participation in being vaccinated in our client base. And so seeing that for the census, I think, was also probably held true. And then for the next question, so I think when Ray was here before, there was an executive order in place that required immigrants to apply for asylum in the first country they passed through. That isn't in place right now, but it did sort of get tweaked into the Remain in Mexico, which then kind of got tweaked into Title 42, which I think explaining immigration policy is not something that I can do. But I do know that Title 42 was in place because of the COVID-19 pandemic. It was overturned in the spring, but then it was kind of put back into place again. So I'm not entirely sure if it's in place or not in place right now. But I do know that with Title 42, we just had millions, of people just kind of at the border waiting to come across. And I also know that when it comes to asylum, if you've been offered asylum somewhere else, you're less likely to be granted asylum in the United States. So when this might come up is, say someone is in Ethiopia or somewhere where there's a lot of political unrest and death threats and things. So they go to maybe South Africa for a bit and they're in a refugee camp there. And in South Africa, they're facing a lot of discrimination because they're from Ethiopia, but that's where they're at right now. They're saving up some money. They're trying to like figure out what they're going to do. They really want to come be with family in the United States, but they need to be able to get up here. And maybe South Africa would say, hey, you can have asylum here, but the asylum that they're getting looks terrible. It's, you know, like you can have asylum here, but you're discriminated against. You're still receiving threats because you're from Ethiopia. You don't have any family here. So then they come to the United States to be with their family, but because they've been offered asylum in South Africa, their ability to get asylum here in the United States might be lessened. So that is something that Larry mentioned that he just dealt with a client that we have recently. So, and then when it comes to the relationship between immigrants and our local law enforcement, Annika was telling me that there's a law in the state of Washington where law enforcement actually isn't allowed to like detain someone extra for ICE purposes. So that wasn't happening, she said, with our law enforcement anyway, but now it shouldn't be happening with any law enforcement. So say someone gets pulled over for a broken taillight, they can't suddenly be booked so that ICE can come get them. Say someone gets arrested for a DUI, they can't be held extra so that ICE can come get them. So ICE still has access to jail and prison rosters. And so they can kind of see who's coming in for a variety of things. And then once they're released from jail or prison, they can pick them up and take them to their detention facility. But we aren't seeing like communication between local law enforcement and ICE. There's not like a partnership there. I do think that there is an election coming up where we're, I think, electing our sheriff for the county. So just kind of paying attention to however you lean when it comes to immigrant rights, paying attention to who's running and what their stance is on a variety of matters, I think is important. So
Definitely, because there's more than one sheriff in the state of Washington who said, I'm not going to comply with this law.
Right.
You know, I'm still going to partner with ICE and tell them.
And then I think we talked a little bit about the tutoring. So what recommendations does KIAC have as to what we can do at the local level to encourage legislative reform? So immigration reform really needs to happen at the federal level. So paying attention to federal elections, I think, is hugely important. That being said, Ray said that anyone can contact Derek Kilmer, Patty Murray, and Maria Cantwell and tell them to approve comprehensive immigration reform that provides a path to citizenship for anyone within this country. I do know that there's letters and templates available online if you're stumped for what wording to use, but you can submit that via phone or mail or email. I also think that there's, again, working within our own spheres of influence, there's power in that. Dispelling misinformation, talking to people about the importance of immigration reform, and then also paying attention to like anytime legislation is trying to like change something, anytime there's like a change in legislation. So for example, I don't remember if this is something we voted on or not, but Washington state driver's licenses are changing, right? They were supposed to change already to this enhanced ID. And then that got deferred because of COVID. And now I think it's coming up next May or something where everyone is required to have an enhanced ID or a passport to be able to fly on an airplane domestically. So what that means for immigrants in the state of Washington can get a driver's license. They will not be eligible to get an enhanced ID. So an immigrant in the state of Washington who is undocumented and doesn't have a passport and can't get an enhanced ID will not be able to fly domestically. So this is a huge group of people that will no longer be able to get on an airplane to go visit their family in another state within this country. Those individuals already, if they're in the middle of an immigration proceeding, usually cannot leave the country. So they already cannot go visit family. They can't visit a grandmother who's dying unless they get specific approval to do that. They cannot travel. And these are people who have lived here for 20 years, maybe. Maybe they were brought here by their families when they were really little. And they really only speak English and they have families of their own. They can't just like go on vacation to Europe or something because they might not be allowed back into this country. So they already can't fly internationally. And now because of this piece of change, and I don't remember if we voted on this or not, but because of this, they won't be able to fly domestically either. So I think anytime if you, when we're looking at these pieces of legislation that are being proposed to be changed or tweaked or added or taken away, just having like this thought of, okay, how does this impact me? But also how would this impact someone who doesn't have documented status in this state? What would this impact their life? What would it look like for them? So I think that's really important as well.